We start off with the best team according to the Brickyard taking on the fifth best team according to the Brickyard. That is the Cleveland Browns going to Houston, taking on the CJ Proud led Houston Texans.
Yeah. So my first question will be, what does making the playoffs mean for the Cleveland Browns? What does it mean for the Houston Texans? Just the story of both of these teams. What is your review of how they got here, the ups and downs of the year, and also the expectations that led both of these teams, who are kind of dark horses? A lot of people scratching their heads, didn't really know what to think of either teams here, starting with the Browns, and then you can cover the Texans. But what was your initial reaction to just the entire ride to get here?
It was a lot of great defensive performances. It was a lot of initial terrible quarterback play. PJ Walker was not fantastic. DTR was not fantastic. And Deshaun Watson was not the Deshaun Watson we had seen in years past. So they strung together a lot of really great wins. Their defense was the best historically of the last 30 years prior. And then as their defense came up with some injuries and their offense as well, that's when a shadow emerged into the distance, and that was none other than the ageless wonder Joe Flacco, Super Bowl winning, dare I say it, quarterback in Joe Flacco. If Donald Trump thinks he's elite, then he's damn sure elite in 2023. So my takeaway with the Browns was, how did they get here? How were they the fifth seed with all the trials and tribulations they face? Great coaching, great defense, and now they have the greatness of Joe Flacco. And then the Texans. We expected them to be decent. We did not expect them to be great. And guess what? They were great this season. CJ Stroud entering himself as a top 5 quarterback in the league, despite losing Tank Dell, despite having a concussion at some points in the season, despite having injuries across the board. D'Amico Ryan stepped in, having Will Anderson be a monster right away. Derek Stingley playing well as well. The Texans have rode a great story. Both of these teams are happy to be here, but one team will prevail into the past the Super Wild Card weekend. Currently, the Browns are the favorites on the road.
Yeah, currently the Browns are the favorites, and I think it's fair that the Browns are the favorites because you look at the Browns this season, it was a story of knowing that they had one of the best rosters in the NFL, but just being unsure of that quarterback position. And then you mentioned we had PJ Walker, we had DTR and CPR stepping in at some points throughout the year, but then Joe Flacco kind of gets signed under the radar. People like, okay, Joe Flacco, that's cool. He's been with the Jets. And then all of a sudden you're like, Joe Flacco, okay. And then you're like, oh, Joe Flacco. Then you're all of a sudden like, oh, this is Joe Flackenheimer. Maybe at a call with Sean McDermott because he looks like he's feeling like a nuclear bomb at this point, and he's going dropping on the rest of the league. And Joe Flacco, if he played an entire season, would be on pace for 55 touchdowns, 30 interceptions, unfortunately. However, he would have thrown for damn near 6,000 yards. And then you have someone like Amari Cooper, who breaks the Browns' single season receiving record, where he has 265 yards, who's kind of thrown away by the Dallas Cowboys. And they really weren't sure what to do with him. They're like, we're fine with CeeDee Lamb. We don't want a dynamic duo with Dak Prescott because we paid him too much money. And then Deshaun Watson, he was trying to massage his way back into the league and ended up eventually needing season-ending surgery. But Joe Flacco has resurrected this team. And then you had Elijah Moore saying this is poetry and motion for the Cleveland Browns, watching Joe Flacco throw the football. So I think for them, they don't really have that much expectations coming on them in the playoffs. You have a lot of people falling in love with what they saw with the Houston Texans and even picking them. So I think you have all the pieces to make a magical run. You have the coaching in Kevin Stefanski, and then Jim Schwartz and Myles Garrett brings that extra edge here for the Cleveland Browns. But the Houston Texans are that Cinderella story where no expectations coming into the season. CJ Stroud seemingly coming out of nowhere, being the number 2 overall pick, and rarely you see the number 2 overall pick play this well this early coming into the season. And then just with what D'Amico Ryans has been able to do with that Texans team, it's kind of surprising that both of these teams are here. In any other division, the Cleveland Browns would have been at least the 2 seed in the AFC if it wasn't for Baltimore having their magical run. So 2 teams that kind of had a lot of questions coming into the year. But the Browns, it was just they needed to figure out that quarterback situation. I think they have. What do you think it means for the Browns to win this game? And what do you think it means for the Texans? And which one has a bigger impact?
I think that it has a bigger impact with the Texans with CJ Stroud. You get CJ Stroud, you win a playoff game, despite the fact that this is a year your wins over under entering the season was 6.5. Nobody expected you to even make the playoffs. You win a playoff game with CJ Stroud, and then you'll face off against one of these top three quarterbacks in the league, most likely. I think it's going to mean a lot for them, especially for teams and players who are interested in coming to them next year. Obviously, Houston's a very attractive place. Texas in general is. So you have an opportunity, especially with someone like T. Higgins, who's going to be watching this from home. You see even someone like a Michael Pittman, who's watching from the sidelines. You see a lot of these players who they have the cap space to sign. A win here, I think that people will be interested regardless. But at the end of the day, with CJ Stroud, if you're a wide receiver and you're looking on your way out, maybe it's an AJ Brown in Philadelphia, maybe it's a T. Higgins in Cincinnati. You see CJ Stroud go up against this top defense in Cleveland and win, then I think that they're going to be the top of the destinations for these teams here, playing with a young rookie quarterback like CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I think they're already the top destination for free agents at this point because not only do you have the great pleasure of having no state income tax there, so you save a little bit of money there, but you have CJ Stroud who definitely elevates the talent around him. You see how hard he works. It's like playing with someone with the work ethic, like a Tom Brady. In his interviews with Tom Brady, he's working hard and asking all of the right questions. And he's also someone who, if he gets the ball in his hands and it's the final drive, start to get a little bit tight if you're on defense. You start to get a little bit nervous. So I think CJ Stroud, well, it would be nice if they did win this game. I don't think you need to win this game if you're the Houston Texans. And I think it definitely would mean more for the Cleveland Browns to win this game. And I think they have to win this game, especially with all of their cap issues, because they're kind of royally fucked going into next year with their cap problems, especially with the Deshaun Watson contract, having to pay Miles Garrett. So you're going to have a lot of players that are going to be leaving this team. You may not have Amari Cooper next year. You may have to part ways with someone like a David Njoku or a Nick Chubb just to free up some cap space. So I think the Cleveland Browns have to win it, but there's no pressure on the Texans to do anything in this game. All you have to do is go out there and be competitive. And I think with this game, the biggest problem is it's really tough to blow out a team and then get right back up a few weeks later and game plan and then do the exact same thing. So I can't see the Browns blowing out the Texans in back-to-back weeks, but I just think the experience of Flacco, Kevin Stefanski's coaching on offense, the way the Colts were able to run the ball against the Texans with Jonathan Taylor still lends itself to an advantage for the Cleveland Browns to inevitably win this game, and I would take them winning 27-21.
Okay. I think that this is a game. I do agree with that score there. I'd have the Texans here because I think that in the playoffs, this is an opportunity to see somebody elevate their game. And I think CJ Stroud proved last week that he's capable of elevating his game. Although he doesn't have his receivers that he normally would have, and he is facing a tough defense, I see him rising to the occasion, playing some great football. The question that I have with the Browns is not so much their defense, but more or less Joe Flacco, although he has played fantastic, and I am rooting for him in this game as well. Two teams that I'm rooting for, just in general. I wish they didn't meet up in the first round. But it's the interceptions, and they had some fumbles that worried me in this past game. The worry that I have is that this is going to be a game that comes down to the last play. And then with the turnovers, how many possessions will the Browns give the Texans? That could be an advantage for the Texans. So that's really why I'm leaning the Texans here. I'm going to have it be more like a 24-21 game, and it could come down to Kaimi Fairbairn.